The notification sound cut through the silence of Meredith Sinclair's apartment like a knife. She stared at her phone screen, and the blood drained from her face. The words glowed back at her, mocking, permanent, devastating. Someone who looks at me the way Julian looks at his daughter. Status delivered to Julian Ashford. Her hands began to shake. The phone nearly slipped from her trembling fingers. No, she whispered into the empty room. No, no, no. 3 hours earlier, the office Christmas party had been in full swing. Meredith had stood in the corner of the decorated conference room, a glass of wine warming in her hand, watching her colleagues laugh and celebrate. The tree twinkled with hundreds of lights. Garland wrapped every door frame. The scent of cinnamon and pine filled the air. But Meredith felt none of the warmth. At 34 years old, she had everything society told her she should want: a corner office, a department head title she had earned through years of tireless work, respect from her peers and subordinates alike, a tastefully decorated apartment in downtown Boston with a view of the harbor, and absolutely no one to share any of it with. Her parents had retired to Scottsdale 3 years ago, trading New England winters for a desert sunshine. Her sister Vivian had married a British banker and moved to London, where she was currently pregnant with her second child. The last 5 Christmases Meredith had spent alone, ordering takeout and pretending the solitude was a choice. But tonight, watching her employees embrace their families, watching them laugh with spouses and show off children to coworkers, the loneliness had felt unbearable. That was when she had seen him. Julian Ashford stood near the refreshment table, his 6-year-old daughter Ellie perched on his hip. The little girl wore a red velvet dress with a white collar, her dark curls bouncing as she giggled at something her father whispered in her ear. Julian smiled down at her with such complete, unconditional adoration that Meredith felt her heart crack open. She knew his story. Everyone in the office did. His wife Corinne had died of breast cancer 2 years ago, leaving Julian to raise their daughter alone. He had applied for a position at Meredith's company specifically because of their generous family leave policy and flexible hours. He was quiet, hardworking, and kept mostly to himself. But when he looked at his daughter, his entire face transformed. The sadness that usually shadowed his eyes disappeared completely. He became luminous with love. Meredith had been watching him for months, watching and wishing and keeping her distance because she was his boss, because it was inappropriate, because a man who had lost the love of his life would never look twice at someone like her, standing in that corner, drowning in Christmas cheer that only emphasized her isolation. Meredith had pulled out her phone. She meant to text her sister in London. She meant to send Vivian her Christmas wish list, a silly tradition they had maintained since childhood. She had typed quickly, not really paying attention. The usual wishes, a new cashmere scarf, that book everyone was talking about, a vacation somewhere warm. And then, before she could stop herself, she had added the truth, the deepest, most secret wish of her heart. Someone who looks at me the way Julian looks at his daughter. She had meant to send it to Vivian. She had meant to press her sister's name in her contacts. But the phone had slipped. Her finger had landed on the wrong name. And before she could comprehend what was happening, the message was gone, sent to Julian Ashford. For a moment, Meredith had simply stared at her screen, unable to process what she had done. Then the reality crashed over her like a wave of ice water, and she had nearly dropped her wine glass. 3 years of careful professionalism, 3 years of maintaining perfect boundaries, 3 years of burying her feelings so deep that even she sometimes forgot they existed, destroyed in one careless tap. She had fled to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and tried to breathe. Her mind raced through the possibilities. She could claim her phone was hacked. She could say it was meant for someone else, that Julian was a common name. She could resign before Monday morning and pretend this never happened. She was still catastrophizing when her phone buzzed with a new message. "I'm in the courtyard. Can we talk?" Meredith read the words 3 times. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to ignore the message, to hide in this bathroom until the party ended, to avoid Julian Ashford for the rest of her professional life. But something stronger than fear pulled her forward. She walked through the party on numb legs, barely registering the festive chaos around her. She pushed through the glass doors that led to the building's inner courtyard, and the December air hit her like a slap. Cold and clean and sharp. Julian stood alone by the frozen fountain, Snowflakes drifted down from the dark sky, catching in his dark hair, landing on the shoulders of his charcoal coat. The Christmas lights strung around the courtyard cast him in soft gold, making him look almost unreal, like a figure from a dream. He turned when he heard her footsteps on the snow-dusted stone. "I should explain," Meredith started, her voice barely above a whisper. "That message was a mistake. I meant to send it to my sister. I was making a wish list and I typed without thinking, and I am so incredibly sorry if I made you uncomfortable." Meredith," Julian said softly. She stopped. He had never called her by her first name before, always Ms. Sinclair, formal and respectful. "I've been trying to find the courage to talk to you outside of work for months." The words hung in the frozen air between them. Meredith forgot how to breathe. "Ellie asks about you all the time," Julian continued, taking a small step closer. She calls you the pretty lady who runs everything. She told me once that you have sad eyes like Daddy." Meredith felt tears prick at the corners of her vision. She blinked them back fiercely. "Last week," Julian said, his voice dropping even lower, "Ellie said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said, 'Daddy doesn't smile since Mommy went to heaven, but when you talk about Miss Meredith, you smile.'" A tear escaped despite Meredith's best efforts. It traced a warm line down her cold cheek. "A 6-year-old saw what I was trying so hard to hide," Julian said. "She saw that you make me feel something I thought I would never feel again." Meredith opened her mouth, but no words came out. This couldn't be happening. This had to be a dream, some cruel trick her lonely mind was playing on her. Behind them, the courtyard door burst open. A group of laughing colleagues spilled out into the snow, their voices loud and jarring. The spell shattered. Meredith stepped back instinctively, the armor of professionalism snapping back into place. "We should pretend this never happened," she said quickly, not meeting Julian's eyes. "I'm your supervisor. This is inappropriate. I could lose my job. You could lose yours. We should just... Some things are worth figuring out, Meredith." She finally looked at him. His eyes were steady, warm, certain. "Even the complicated ones," he finished, but Meredith was already retreating, already running from the possibility of happiness because the fear of losing it was too great. She mumbled something about getting back inside and fled, leaving Julian alone in the falling snow. That night in her empty apartment, Meredith sat on her bed and stared at the city lights beyond her window. The silence pressed in on her from all sides. No family photos on the walls, no stockings hung by a fireplace she didn't have, no evidence that anyone lived here at all except for the plaques and awards that documented her career achievements. Her phone sat on the nightstand, glowing faintly. Against her better judgment, she picked it up. There was a new message from Julian. Just a photo, a small snow globe, purchased from somewhere, containing a tiny family building a snowman. And beneath the image, 5 words. "Some wishes deserve a chance." Meredith clutched the phone to her chest and for the first time in years, allowed herself to hope. New Year's Eve arrived cold and bright. Meredith stood at the entrance to Holloway Park's winter festival, watching her breath form small clouds in the frigid air. She had changed outfits 4 times that morning, feeling ridiculous each time. She was a 34-year-old executive, not a teenager preparing for prom. But the butterflies in her stomach refused to acknowledge her age. She saw them before they saw her. Julian walked through the festival gates, Ellie's small hand clasped in his. The little girl wore a puffy pink jacket and a hat with cat ears, bouncing with barely contained excitement as she pointed at everything around her. Then Ellie spotted Meredith. "You came!" the child shrieked, breaking free from her father and running full speed toward Meredith. "I knew you would. Daddy said maybe you'd be too busy, but I knew you'd come because you're nice and I wanted to show you how I can skate." Meredith laughed as she caught the small whirlwind, lifting her slightly off the ground. The easy affection startled her. Children usually made her nervous, but Ellie had a way of bulldozing through social barriers with her pure, uncomplicated joy. Julian approached more slowly, his hands in his pockets, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Thank you for coming," he said, and somehow those simple words carried the weight of something much larger. The afternoon unfolded like something from a movie. They drank hot chocolate topped with mountains of whipped cream, leaving them all with matching foam mustaches that sent Ellie into fits of giggles. They watched ice sculptors transform blocks of frozen water into crystalline swans and polar bears. They browsed stalls selling handmade ornaments and roasted chestnuts. Meredith bought Ellie a knitted hat with cat ears to replace the one she was wearing, which had a small tear in one ear. "This is my favorite hat ever in the whole universe," Ellie declared, hugging Meredith's legs with surprising strength. At the skating rink, Meredith clung to the railing with exaggerated terror while Ellie zoomed around the ice with natural grace. Julian skated up beside her, steady and sure. "I haven't done this since college," Meredith admitted. "Here," he said, offering his hand. "I've got you." She hesitated for only a moment before placing her gloved hand in his. They made slow circuits around the rink, Ellie darting ahead and circling back like an excited puppy, and gradually Meredith found her balance, both on the ice and in this strange new territory with Julian. She's amazing," Meredith said, watching Ellie attempt a wobbly spin. You've done an incredible job with her." Julian's expression softened, but something sad moved behind his eyes. "It hasn't been easy. After Corinne died, there were days I could barely get out of bed, but Ellie needed me to be whole, even when I felt completely broken." He was quiet for a moment, and Meredith waited. "The night Corinne passed," he finally said, his voice rough, "she held my hand and made me promise something. She said, 'Promise me you'll live again. Promise me you'll let yourself love again.' I promised her. I swore on everything we had together that I would." His grip on Meredith's hand tightened slightly. "For 2 years, I couldn't keep that promise. I thought that part of me had died with her, and then..." He looked at Meredith, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Then I started noticing you, the way you treated everyone with respect, even the interns, the way you worked harder than anyone but never demanded credit, the way you looked so lonely sometimes when you thought no one was watching." Meredith felt exposed, vulnerable, seen in a way that was terrifying and wonderful. "I started finding reasons to walk past your office," Julian continued, and started volunteering for projects you were leading. Corinne would have laughed at me. She always said I was hopeless at expressing my feelings. Ellie skated up then, pink-cheeked and breathless. "I'm hungry. Can we get pretzels? The big ones with salt." The moment passed, but something had shifted between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that could not be unsaid. As dusk fell, they walked toward the park exit, Ellie between them, occasionally holding both their hands and swinging herself forward with delighted squeals. "This was the best day," she declared as they reached Julian's car. "Can Meredith come to our house now? We have cookies. I helped make them." Julian looked at Meredith with a question in his eyes. "No pressure. I'm sure you have plans." She should have said no. Going to his home would cross yet another boundary, but the thought of returning to her empty apartment while they went home together made her chest ache. "I'd love to see your cookies, Ellie, if it's really okay with your dad." The smile that lit up Julian's face was answer enough. Their home was exactly as Meredith had imagined, modest but warm, with photographs covering every available surface and children's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. A small Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with an eclectic mix of ornaments that told the story of their family. "This one was Corinne's," Julian explained quietly, showing Meredith a delicate glass angel. "And these," he pointed to several clearly handmade decorations, "Ellie makes a new one every year. It's beautiful," Meredith said sincerely. "All of it." They ate cookies and played an enthusiastic game of Candyland until Ellie's eyes began to droop. Meredith watched as Julian carried his sleepy daughter to bed, feeling like an intruder in this intimate family moment, yet somehow strangely at home. She was gathering her coat when the doorbell rang. Julian answered it, and Meredith heard a woman's voice, sharp with surprise. "You didn't mention you had company." A woman in her early 60s stepped into the living room. She was elegantly dressed, silver hair perfectly styled, and her eyes locked onto Meredith with immediate suspicion. "Mother," Julian said, his voice carefully neutral. "This is Meredith. Meredith, my mother, Genevieve Ashford." "Mrs. Ashford," Meredith said, extending her hand. "It's nice to meet you." Genevieve did not take it. Her gaze swept over Meredith with undisguised assessment, and whatever she saw did not please her. "I should go," Meredith said quickly, sensing the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees. "Thank you for a lovely day, Julian. It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Ashford." She fled into the cold night, and behind her, she heard the front door close. What she didn't hear was the conversation that followed. "Corinne has only been gone 2 years," Genevieve said, her voice cold. "Have you forgotten her already?" "Mother, I haven't forgotten. I'm trying to live again like Corinne wanted." She's your boss, Julian. She could destroy your career anytime. And what about Ellie? Have you thought about what happens if this goes wrong? Julian had no answer, but the doubt his mother planted took root and began to grow. 2 weeks later, the storm arrived. It started with whispers. A colleague named Bradley from the accounting department had seen them at Holloway Park. He had noticed Julian pushing Ellie on the swings while Meredith stood nearby, laughing at something the little girl said. He had seen the way Julian looked at Meredith when she wasn't watching. Bradley had mentioned it to his cubicle neighbor, who mentioned it to someone in marketing, who eventually mentioned it to someone who felt obligated to inform human resources. Meredith sat in her office, staring at an email that made her stomach drop. There has been a report regarding an inappropriate relationship between a manager and subordinate. Please see me tomorrow morning. Margaret Whitmore, HR Director. Someone knew, someone had seen them, and someone had reported them. The meeting with Margaret was tense, but not hostile. The HR Director was firm, but fair. Company policy is clear, Margaret explained. Romantic relationships between supervisors and their direct reports are prohibited. I'm giving you 1 week to resolve this situation. Either the relationship ends, or one of you needs to transfer to a different department. That night, Meredith drove to Julian's house, her mind spinning with impossible choices. She found him in his small home office, and there, on his desk, she saw something that stopped her cold. A letter, dated 6 months ago, back in June, an offer of promotion to the company's Chicago branch, a senior position with a significant raise, a major career advancement, marked declined. You turned this down, Meredith said, her voice hollow. 6 months ago, you could have advanced your career and you said no. Julian looked at the letter, then at her. If I transferred, I wouldn't see you every day anymore. I wasn't brave enough to say anything then, but he paused, struggling with the words. You were the reason I wanted to go to work every morning. Meredith felt tears sliding down her cheeks. You gave up your career advancement because of me, before I had any hope that you might feel the same way, Julian finished. Yes? The next morning, Meredith's phone rang. The caller ID showed Genevieve Ashford. Her heart sank as she answered. I know what you're doing. Genevieve's voice was ice. If you don't stay away from my son, I'll make sure the company knows everything. I'll go to the board if I have to. I'll tell them you're exploiting your position to seduce a grieving widower. Mrs. Ashford, that's not what... Stay away from my son, stay away from my granddaughter, or I will destroy your career. The line went dead. Meredith sat in her empty apartment that night, looking around at the sterile space she had called home for 5 years. No family photos, no memories, nothing but evidence of a career that suddenly felt meaningless. If she stayed with Julian, he would lose his mother, maybe his job. His daughter would be caught in the crossfire of a family torn apart. She couldn't do that to them. She couldn't be the reason his family fell apart. With shaking hands, Meredith opened her laptop and began to type. Dear Margaret, please accept this letter as formal notice of my resignation. She finished the letter at 2 a.m. She didn't sleep. She sat by her window watching the city lights blur through her tears, thinking about Julian and Ellie and the life she was giving up to protect them. By morning, her decision was made. Her eyes were red. Her heart was broken, but her resolve was firm. Meredith walked into Margaret Whitmore's office with her resignation letter clutched in her hand. Her heart felt hollow, emptied of everything except the cold certainty that she was doing the right thing. Margaret looked up from her desk, but before Meredith could speak, the HR director raised her hand. Before you say anything, I need you to hear me out. Meredith froze. Sit down, please. She sat, the resignation letter crinkling in her grip. The executive team has been monitoring your performance for the past 3 years, Margaret began. Your work has been exceptional. Your leadership has transformed your department. Several board members have specifically noted your potential for senior leadership. Meredith had no idea where this was going. There's a new position opening next month, Director of Operations. You would work directly with the C-suite, overseeing multiple departments. Margaret paused, her eyes meeting Meredith's. Departments that would not include Julian Ashford's team. The words took a moment to penetrate. You're offering me a promotion, Meredith said slowly, so I can date my employee. Margaret's expression remained professionally neutral, but something like amusement flickered in her eyes. I'm offering you a promotion because you deserve it. The timing is simply convenient. Meredith looked down at the resignation letter in her hands. The letter that would have ended her career. The letter she had been prepared to submit because she thought sacrifice was the only path forward. There's also the matter of the complaint, Margaret continued. After investigation, it was determined to be based on office gossip rather than any actual policy violation. The original reporter has been counseled about appropriate use of HR resources. Meredith nodded slowly, but her mind went to a darker place, to Genevieve, to the threats. What about external complaints? If someone outside the company were to... Margaret's expression shifted slightly. Funny you should mention that. Mrs. Genevieve Ashford came to see me yesterday. She was quite passionate in her concerns about her son's well-being. Meredith's heart sank. However, Margaret continued, after a lengthy conversation about the actual nature of your relationship, the company's policies, and her son's own feelings on the matter, I believe she left with a different perspective. I explained that you had prepared to resign rather than harm Julian's career. That seemed to surprise her. Meredith stared at Margaret, trying to process this information. She threatened to go to the board, Meredith said quietly. She did mention that possibility, Margaret acknowledged. I reminded her that making false accusations about company employees could have legal consequences. And I also mentioned that sacrificing one's career for the well-being of someone else's family is not typically the action of someone with malicious intent. For the first time in days, Meredith felt something other than despair, a small flicker of hope. What happens now? She asked. Now you accept this promotion, Margaret said, sliding a folder across the desk. And what happens in your personal life is entirely your business. That evening, Julian confronted his mother. Do you know what Corinne said before she died? He asked, his voice steady but intense. She made me promise to live again, to love again. Do you think she wanted me to be alone forever? Do you think that's what she was hoping for when she made me swear? Genevieve stood rigid, her face a mask. She would have wanted you to be careful, to protect yourself and Ellie. She would have wanted me to be happy, Mother. She said those exact words. Be happy again, Julian. Don't let grief become your whole life. Ellie wandered in from the hallway, drawn by the raised voices. Grandma? She asked, her small face worried. Are you mad at Meredith? Genevieve looked at her granddaughter, and something in her expression cracked. I like Meredith, Ellie continued innocently. She taught me how to braid my hair like Mommy used to do, and she reads me stories in funny voices. And when I told her I missed Mommy, she didn't say anything dumb. She just hugged me and said it was okay to be sad. Tears welled in Genevieve's eyes. She sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 62 years. I was just so scared, she whispered, of watching you fall apart again. When Corinne died, when I saw you disappear inside yourself, I thought I had lost my son too. I watched you become a ghost in your own life. I couldn't bear to watch that happen again. Julian knelt beside his mother's chair. I understand, I do, but Meredith is different. She's not going to hurt me. She was willing to give up her entire career just to protect me and Ellie. She was going to resign, Mother, walk away from everything she'd built just so we wouldn't suffer any consequences. Genevieve looked up, surprise evident on her face. The HR woman told me that, she admitted quietly. I didn't believe her at first. Meredith has given me hope, Julian continued. She's given me a reason to smile again. Isn't that what you want for me? Isn't that what Corinne would have wanted? Genevieve reached out and touched her son's face the way she had when he was a boy. Then I suppose, she said softly, I should meet her properly, without the hostility this time. 1 year to the day after the accidental text message, Julian led Meredith to the courtyard at their office building, the same courtyard where they had first spoken honestly. The same fountain, now running again in the milder December weather, the same Christmas lights twinkling like earthbound stars. Snow began to fall, soft and gentle, as if the sky itself was blessing the moment. Julian took Meredith's hands in his. 1 year ago, you sent me a message by mistake, a wish you never meant to share, and that one mistake changed everything. Meredith felt tears threatening, but she smiled through them. I've spent this year falling more in love with you every day, Julian continued, watching you become part of Ellie's life, seeing my mother finally accept that happiness isn't a betrayal of the past, learning that my heart didn't die when Corinne did. It was just waiting for you. He reached into his pocket and began to lower himself to one knee. From behind a snow-dusted evergreen, Ellie burst into view, unable to contain herself any longer. She was holding a small velvet box. "I kept it safe for Daddy," she announced proudly, thrusting the box toward Julian. Meredith laughed through her tears as Julian took the box from his daughter. "Will you marry us?" Ellie asked, bouncing on her toes. "Not just Daddy, me too. Will you be my family forever?" Julian opened the box. Inside, a simple diamond ring caught the light of 1,000 Christmas bulbs. What she said," Julian added, his voice rough with emotion. Meredith couldn't speak. She could only nod over and over as Julian slipped the ring onto her finger, and Ellie threw herself at both of them, creating a three-person embrace in the falling snow. The wedding took place the following June in a small chapel outside Boston. White flowers and soft greenery decorated every surface. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbows across the wooden pews. Meredith's parents had flown in from Scottsdale, initially skeptical but won over completely by Julian's steady devotion and Ellie's irresistible charm. Her sister Vivian had traveled from London, serving as matron of honor and crying more than anyone during the ceremony. Genevieve Ashford sat in the front row, no longer an adversary but an ally. Over the past months, she had come to love Meredith. She had seen how Meredith cared for Ellie, how she honored Corinne's memory rather than trying to erase it, how she made Julian laugh in ways Genevieve hadn't heard since before the cancer diagnosis. Ellie, now 7 years old, served as flower girl. She walked down the aisle with tremendous solemnity, scattering white rose petals with the focus of a surgeon performing a delicate operation. But the most powerful moment came during the reception. The toast had begun. Friends and family rose to share stories and well wishes, and then Ellie approached the microphone, clutching a crumpled piece of paper. "I wrote a speech," she announced to the gathered guests. "Daddy and Meredith don't know about it, so this is a surprise." Julian and Meredith exchanged startled glances. Before Meredith came," Ellie began, her small voice clear and steady, "it was just Daddy and me. Daddy did everything good. He cooked me breakfast and took me to school and read me stories every night, but Daddy didn't smile much, and sometimes when he thought I was sleeping, I heard him crying in his room." Meredith reached for Julian's hand under the table. His fingers were trembling. "Then one day, Daddy told me about the accident text. He was smiling when he told me. I like when Daddy smiles." The room was utterly silent, every eye fixed on this small girl speaking truths that adults struggled to voice. "Meredith taught me how to braid my hair like Mommy used to do. Meredith helped me with my science project about butterflies, and I got a gold star. Meredith told me I remind her of Mommy, and I know that's the best compliment ever." Tears were flowing freely now from nearly every guest in attendance. "I think Mommy in heaven is smiling too," Ellie continued, "because Daddy is happy now, and I have one more person who loves me." She looked up from her paper, her eyes shining. "Sometimes accidents are really magic in disguise. And I'm really happy that Meredith is my bonus mom now." The room erupted in applause. Meredith was sobbing openly, reaching for Ellie, pulling her into a fierce embrace. Julian wrapped his arms around both of them, his own tears falling unashamedly. Genevieve Ashford dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She caught Meredith's gaze across the room and nodded slowly, a gesture of acceptance, of welcome, of love. That night, Julian presented Meredith with a wedding gift, a snow globe, custom made, containing miniature figures of the three of them standing beside a Christmas tree. Engraved on the silver base, "Some wishes deserve to come true." "Hearts don't have limits," Julian said softly, holding her close. "They expand. What I feel for you doesn't diminish what I had with Corinne, and what you feel for Ellie and me doesn't take away from who you are. We're not replacing anything. We're building something new, together." The summer sun cast long golden shadows across the backyard of the Ashford home. Meredith sat on the porch swing, a glass of iced tea in her hand, watching her family. Julian was teaching their 3-year-old son Maxwell how to kick a soccer ball. Max, with his father's dark hair and his mother's determined expression, concentrated fiercely on the task. No, Daddy, like this. Ellie, now 12 years old, demonstrated a proper kick with the confidence of someone who had spent the past year on her school's soccer team. She had grown into a beautiful young woman with her mother, Corinne's grace, and her father's kind eyes. From the kitchen came the smell of baking cookies and the sound of Genevieve humming along to the radio. She had become a regular fixture in their lives, visiting every Sunday for family dinner, spoiling both grandchildren with equal enthusiasm. Meredith's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at the screen and smiled. An email from work confirming her promotion to vice president of operations. She had spent the past 5 years reshaping company policies, making it easier for employees to balance work and family, ensuring that no one else would face the impossible choice she had almost been forced to make. "Mom," Ellie called out, "watch me do a cartwheel." The words still made Meredith's heart swell, even after 4 years of hearing it. Ellie had started calling her mom about a year after the wedding, a decision the girl had made entirely on her own. They kept Corinne's memory alive through stories and photographs, making sure Max knew about the brave, kind woman who had been Ellie's first mother. There was room for both loves in their family. Julian jogged over to the porch and collapsed beside Meredith on the swing, slightly out of breath. "Getting old," he complained, but his eyes were sparkling. 41 isn't old," Meredith countered. "Tell that to my knees." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Max toddle after his big sister, who was patiently demonstrating the proper cartwheel technique. "Happy?" Julian asked, the same question he asked her every evening. Meredith looked at her family, at the man who had taken a chance on a mistaken text message, at the daughter who had accepted her with open arms, at the son they had made together, at the mother-in-law who had learned to love instead of fear. "More than any wish I ever dared to make," she answered truthfully. Her phone buzzed again, a text from Vivian in London. "Coming to visit for Christmas. The kids can't wait to see their cousins." Meredith smiled and typed a quick reply, hitting send without double-checking the recipient, because she had learned something important 6 years ago in a snowy courtyard filled with Christmas lights. Sometimes the message you're most afraid to send is the one that changes everything. Sometimes the mistake you think will ruin your life is actually the beginning of something beautiful. She looked at the phone in her hand, then at Julian beside her, then at their children playing in the fading summer light. Some messages she knew now are meant to be sent, even the ones that terrify us. All you have to do is be brave enough to hit send.